What's up everyone? Welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be talking about why I decided to quit my job without a backup plan. I spent a lot of time wrestling with this decision before I determined what was best for me, so I figured walking through my thought process might help you if you're considering leaving your job or making any big decision in life. This is how the video will be structured. There are timestamps in the description below, and with that, let's get right into it. I've known forever that I wanted to be my own boss and that I didn't want to work a 9 to 5. But I graduated college with a finance degree and like so many other people had a pile of student loan debt to repay. And on top of that, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And honestly, I still don't. So upon graduation, I took a job with a big company doing corporate finance because it paid well, it looked good on a resume, and honestly, I loved the people there. But it didn't take long, maybe a few months, for me to start having this feeling that I experienced a lot in high school as well, where I couldn't tell how what I was doing day in and day out was getting me any closer to the dreams that I had for myself. When I first started having those feelings, my first thought was that I wanted to leave my job. But after having a conversation with a close friend of mine, I decided that I should stick it out and I should try to improve my situation before acting on my first impulse to leave. So after 6 months, I moved into a new role at the company in an entirely different state, and I took on new responsibilities with the hope that by changing things up, I might experience a renewed sense of excitement for my work. I gave this new role another 6 months, and even though I loved the people that I worked with, I knew at this point that working a 9 to 5 just wasn't for me. And even though I knew deep down that I wanted to quit, I hadn't absolutely made up my mind yet because I was terrified of leaving for a few reasons. First and foremost, I was scared of running out of money. By this point, I had paid off my student loans, but I was in the job for the money and I was making a steady paycheck, and I was afraid of losing that. Second, I was scared of leaving the people that I worked with. I developed great relationships at my job, and I was afraid of losing them, but I was also afraid that I was kind of screwing them over by adding more work to their plates by leaving, and I really didn't want to do that. And the third thing I was scared of, and this one was huge, was the uncertainty that I was going to face once I became unemployed. Yes, a big part of this was the fact that I didn't know where my next paycheck was going to come from. But there were also things like not knowing what I was going to do next, or what I would tell people when they asked what I did for a living. And honestly, just the overall fear of the unknown. Up to that point, my entire life had been more or less scripted for me. Go to school until you're 18, go to college until you're 22 or 23, get a job until you're 65 or whatever age you've saved up enough to be able to retire. And the idea of taking a leap outside of that structure that I was so used to and had become so comfortable with was really scary. I mulled over these fears and what I really wanted to do for months, and I ultimately came to a conclusion that completely changed my perspective. This one realization allowed me to overcome all 3 fears that I mentioned earlier, plus other smaller ones as well. What I concluded after months of reflection and reading and introspection is that I value time exponentially more than I value any other non-living thing in this world. Now, consider this with me for a second. Between the ages of 22, when you graduate college, and 65, when you retire, 43 years will pass. Out of those 43 years, assuming that you sleep for an average of 8 hours a night, you'll spend 14 of those sleeping. So that leaves 29 years between the ages of 22 and 65 that you'll actually spend awake. And if you work on average 8 hours per day and 260 days per year, then you'll spend 10 of those 29 waking years at your job. So if you work a 9 to 5 that you don't enjoy, that leaves you 19 years to spend doing the things that you love. And when you start to add in other tasks that you have to do throughout the day, like taking a shower, cleaning your house, cooking your meals, that number begins to get even smaller. And I'm not including any of the time spent taking care of kids, because if you don't love that, even when that stuff sucks, then you probably shouldn't become a parent. But either way, the point is that we have a lot less time to spend doing the things that we love than a lot of us probably think. And that brings me back to my conclusion about valuing time more than almost anything else in the world. Think about it. You can trade time and a lot of other things for money, but you can't trade anything else in the entire world for more time. Once time is gone, it's gone for good. And the less you have of it, the more valuable it becomes. And right now, at this very moment, this is the youngest you'll ever be again in your entire life. I don't know about you, but that completely blew my mind when I started to think about it. Even 5 seconds ago when I just started that sentence, that was the youngest you were ever going to be in your life. You'll never be that young again. And once I start to take that perspective, I know myself, and I know that when I'm older, I'll be haunted by the fact that I spent my very limited time doing anything other than the things that I absolutely loved, especially while I was young. There's a quote from Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard that says, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." And that is so true. But if you understand that, then you can try to make decisions now based on the perspective that you'll have in the future. So the way I like to do this, and I genuinely think everyone should practice this much more often, imagine you're 80 years old. You're drinking coffee in the morning, overlooking the ocean, and you're reflecting back on your life and thinking about what you would do differently if you had the chance. Now, from the perspective of your 80-year-old self, think about the situation that you're currently faced with. What would make 80-year-old you happy, and what would make 80-year-old you regretful? When you're old and gray and wrinkly, will you regret sticking with a job that you don't enjoy to make some money, rather than going out to pursue the things that you really enjoy that make you happy? Personally, I know that I would, and that's what allowed me to make the decision to leave my job even though I didn't know what I would do next. At the end of the day, I just want to be in control of my time because in the grand scheme of things, we have so little of it. And my biggest fear in life is sitting on that balcony when I'm 80, looking out over the ocean and regretting the things that I didn't do because I was afraid. And even though I think that this example is extremely powerful and it's helped me make a lot of decisions in my life recently, it's also flawed because it assumes that we'll actually live to be 80 years old. Now, to be fair, some of us will live longer than 80, some of us much longer. But a lot of us won't even make it to 80. In reality, no day is guaranteed. I could die tomorrow. And if that's the case, I don't want to spend the majority of my final days doing something that I don't absolutely love. And for me personally, I just didn't love my 9-to-5 job. In my personal opinion, that perspective is the most powerful way to make big decisions. But if people need a more practical approach that's a little bit more logical and hands-on rather than emotional, then I highly recommend giving this exercise a try. It's called fear setting, and it was designed by Tim Ferriss, and the first time that I heard about it was in his TED Talk, which I'll link below. So I'll explain it high level here, and if you want to go further or you want to dive into the details, I encourage you to check out his full presentation. First, you take a blank piece of paper, and I recommend using a physical piece of pen and paper rather than your computer. I've just found it to be more impactful. At the top, you write down the words, "What if I?" and then you follow that up with whatever it is that you're afraid of doing. For example, I wrote, "What if I quit my job?" But you could also write something like, "What if I put myself out there on social media?" Or, "What if I ask my boss for a raise?" Then just below that, you create 3 columns. The first column is labeled define, and this is where you'll write down all of the worst case scenarios. All of the things you're afraid of happening if you actually take action and do what you wrote at the top of the paper. For me, it was, what if I quit my job and I run out of money? But continuing along with the other examples, it could be, what if I put myself out there on social media and I become embarrassed? Or what if I ask my boss for a raise and she fires me? Like I said, it's worst case scenarios. The second column is labeled prevent, and as you might guess, this is where you're going to write down everything you can do to prevent the worst case scenario from happening, or at least, as Tim says, decrease the likelihood. So for me, it was to prevent running out of money, I could find myself a part-time job. But it could also be to avoid feeling embarrassed, I will look inward instead of outward for validation. Or to prevent being fired from my boss, I'll prepare data points to showcase the results that I've produced over the past year. And the third column is labeled repair. And this is where you're going to write down everything that you would do to repair the damage if your preventions don't work and your worst case scenarios actually do end up coming true. For me, it was, if I run out of money, then I'll sell my car. But it could also be, if I become embarrassed, then I'll stop posting until I experience more growth. Or if I lose my job, then I'll network with family and friends to find a new one. So once you fill in those 3 columns, that wraps up part 1 of a 3-part exercise. Part 2 is defining all of the benefits of partial success, or at least an attempt at what you wrote at the top of page 1. And part 3 is the cost of inaction. So if you don't take action and do what you wrote down on the top of page 1, then what might that inaction cost you down the road? And if you're anything like me, what you'll likely find after completing part 1 of fear setting is that A, some of your fears are actually valid, and they're things that you should genuinely pay attention to and consider before taking action. And B, in my opinion, more importantly, most of your fears aren't actually as scary as you thought, and a lot of them are preventable. The moral of the story is that life is way too short to spend our time doing things that we don't genuinely enjoy, and as Seneca so wisely put it, we suffer more often in imagination than we do in reality. In other words, the things that we fear so much, like quitting our job, aren't really as scary as we think they are. If you have any questions about fear setting, like I said, check out Tim's video, but also feel free to leave a comment under the video and I'll do my very best to answer. So obviously everybody's situation is different, everybody's circumstances are unique. I feel very grateful and very privileged to be able to actually quit my job and spend some time trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. I completely respect and understand that there are a lot of people who don't have this luxury, but I just wanted to provide my perspective in case anybody else is in a situation that's similar, or even if the situation is a little bit different, maybe this perspective will help them make other decisions in their life if they're not able to leave their job. Time is valuable, so I really appreciate you spending your time with me. I hope you get out of this video as much as I put into it. If you did, please share it with others who you think it might help as well. Subscribe if you want more content like this. Feel free to leave a comment below with any feedback on how I can improve. If you've ever thought about wanting to be more authentic on social media, but you're afraid to take action, you might enjoy my video here, where I explained exactly why I decided to be more authentic and how I overcame the fear of putting myself out there. Thanks a lot for watching to the very end. I really appreciate it. Live your life to the fullest today, and I'll see you next time.